As you can tell, I am in a classroom. I am teaching strategic pricing specialists today. Everybody is off to lunch, but I wanted to join you to continue a couple of conversations that we've been having, specifically about negotiating, because that is our series, the topic that we're talking about right now. Now, a couple of days ago, I came in and did a Facebook Live about emotions and handling tactics for handling emotions within your peeps. And let me say this to you. We've seen several things happening, several conversations going on in the Facebook group. And one really good point came from Elizabeth Scott, who came in and said, you know what, I am struggling with the emotions of other agents. And that was such an incredible point. That is also a big issue. It's not just your buyers or sellers' emotions. And it's not just your emotions, but by the way, you've got to deal with your emotions too, but it's also their emotions. And when you get an agent who is struggling with their emotions, it really affects you and it affects your negotiation. So there's a couple of things I want to say about that. The first one is that your job is to be this really nice, very good and stable influence on your client. And despite the fact you may have someone who's over here screaming at you, you still have to keep this nice, calm mode going for your client. I have had many times when I have had somebody just rip one on me that I had to pick up the phone and call my client and stay stable. Because if I pick up the phone and call my client and say to my client, you know what, you cannot believe what that other agent said to me. That is going to do nothing at all but inflame your client, and that is so bad. As we talked about on Tuesday, when your client gets emotional, their good decision making diminishes significantly. So you have to keep stable, and it's really hard to do sometimes when there's somebody yelling at you. That makes it so incredibly difficult. So let me say this to you, a couple of things, and I'm going to throw in a book recommendation in the middle of all of this. One of the most probably profound books that I have ever read, and I think I'm a reader. I love reading all kinds of books. I only read nonfiction, and I know that's kind of peculiar if you're a fiction lover, but to give you the short story on that, years and years and years ago, 25 years ago, I stopped smoking, and I used to sit around and read fiction and smoke while I was reading fiction, and I quit reading while I was quitting smoking because I related those two things together. And anytime I try to read fiction, I want a cigarette. Even to this day, 25 years later, so I just don't read fiction anymore. I only read nonfiction, and I know that may sound ridiculous, but it's my neuroses. So anyway, there's this book that I just fell in love with, and it made a significant difference to me, and it's something called The Four Agreements. And they talk about the four really intentional life lessons for you to understand and for you to carry forward. And the second agreement has to do with don't take things personally. Do not take things personally. And the thing I learned, and it has been a significant influence on me, is that when someone is screaming at you or they are posturing with you, that has everything to do with them and not with you. That has everything to do with them and has nothing to do with you. It's not personal at all. They are trying to make you feel worse because of a problem they have. And that is a very significant, profound thought, is that. So this has nothing to do with you. It has to do with them. So the same tactics I shared with you a couple of days ago also apply to another real estate agent. So go back and revisit those. And the second thing I want to say about it is the idea of it's not about you, it's about them and their troubles. So don't accept it. Don't accept what they're doing. Just listen. They're in a bad place. Anytime someone's yelling at me, I always think, this is their bad place. It isn't my bad place. So I just wanted to follow up on the emotion piece with that. Now, that's number one. Number two, I also wanted to talk about another comment that we got, and it came from Becky Lipsick. And Becky made a point that she finds that the majority of the negotiating is happening during inspections these days. And you know something? She's absolutely right. Every offer has more than one spot of negotiation. You're not just negotiating the contract, you're also negotiating the inspections. And sometimes you're also negotiating the walkthrough, and sometimes you're negotiating all kinds of things in an event. And one of the things that she talked about was this idea of doing what we call a bargaining chip. And a bargaining chip is when you throw something into the negotiation that you know you can give away. So I want to dig on that for just a minute, because I think that's a truly important tactic or strategy in a negotiation. So let me talk to you about this. When you are making some decisions about what to offer to someone, whether it's an original offer or a counter offer or an inspection offer, what you need to think about is this. What is that person's next move? If you do this, they are probably going to respond by this. So what is their next move? And then when you think through what the probabilities are that they're going to move this way or they're going to move this way, then you have to ask yourself the question, if they do that, what would our next move be? So really forward think about what the possibilities. It's like a chess game. If I make that move, what move are they going to make? So think those moves through. That's number one. Number two is to say, I always make an assumption that the person that I'm negotiating with has to win, and I want to give them a place of giving up something that they will go, oh, I got something, and it will satisfy them. So when you're doing that, think about things that you can add that you can then throw away, because they're just not important to you and your client, but you can throw them away. I want to give you an example, and actually I'm going to draw on the board to give you an example, and I hope this works. And I hope you can see it. So here's the deal, and I'm going to explain to you a deal that I saw many years ago, and I think this will be an interesting deal. So I had a buyer, and I had this buyer who they could afford $265,000. Not 1 cent more, not 1 cent more, not 1 cent more could they do than 265. We had found a new construction house that had been completed. It was from a small company who only built 10 houses a year. Now that is important, because when you have a small builder who has built a house, it is finished, tick tock on their interest. And so they're more motivated. This house had everything they wanted except a screened-in porch. It in fact had a deck. Right? So it just had a deck on it. All right? So it just had a deck on it. Well, they really wanted a screened-in porch. That was their dream, to have a screened-in porch. Well, here was the deal. I knew that if I went and wrote an offer full price and asked for this to be screened in, that more than likely the next move would be he would either reject the offer, or he would come back and he would say to us, yeah, I will do that screen-in porch for X amount. Well, it just wasn't going to work, because I couldn't afford over $265,000. So if I had offered less, that didn't work either. So I had to figure this out. I had to figure out how to get them this screened-in porch. So what I decided to do was throw in a bargaining chip. What did I do? I wrote an offer for this to be a screened porch, and then I asked for what can only be called the biggest party deck ever in the world. I asked for a party deck that was enormous, that came out here and came out here. By the way, there was no restrictive covenants in this place, so I hope you can see that. But a big old porch, a big old deck. And not only a deck, I wanted seating on the deck, I wanted planters on the deck, I wanted speakers on the deck. I went for it. We were asking for a whole bunch of stuff. Now, what my intention here was for him to come back and say, you cannot have both. You can have one, but you cannot have both. That was my intention of this. And he did, in fact, do that. He came back and said, you can't have both of those, but you can have one. That's exactly what we wanted to do. It was a bargaining chip. Well, we didn't care about that deck. We wanted that screened-in porch. But he would not have given me that screened-in porch if I had just asked for the screened-in porch. I needed to ask for something else, too, that I could throw away. That is how the bargaining chip works. Now, Becky was saying that very often on the inspection, she'll throw extra things in on the inspection, understanding that she could throw them away, and that's another perfectly good way of dealing with it. But this is a strategy called the bargaining chip. She brought that forward. Here's another example of it. It is a really tried and true strategy that you should be using in your negotiations. So I wanted to bring that forward. All right. So to summarize all of this up, we talked about the emotions of the agent. Go check out the 4 agreements. You will be glad that you did. Go back and revisit the tactics. They all apply to this as well. And then secondly, we introduced the skill called the bargaining chip. Adding things in to be able to throw them away to satisfy the other person. All right, please go in here and put in your comments and any suggestions, thoughts, etc. that you have to add to this conversation. All right, I'll see you again soon.